This video is part of the October 9th remote class where we are focused on the concept of selections. We introduced it last video, really showing just the manual select here, which would allow us to drag and highlight certain records, crimes, neighborhoods, whatever. And once we had them highlighted, not only could we then visually look at them differently than the rest of the records, but we found out that it sort of prioritized them. Anytime something is selected, it will be the only thing that calculates a field. It'd be the only thing that would export, or the only thing that you could summarize or perform statistics to. So it's a powerful concept. But given that we're learning GIS, Geographic Information Systems, it stands to reason that we should be able to use the G, geography, and the I, information, to assist in these selections. And that's what we'll do in this video, is we'll really focus on the I, select by attributes. Use the information in your data to take 21,000 crimes and narrow it down to a specific subgroup of crimes that you would want to analyze based on some type of information, and see how that then visually depicts itself spatially on the map. Select by attributes is best engaged probably up here. And it's a relatively simple tool when you first see it. It'll want to know, what am I selecting? Well, I want you to select from crimes. And it'll also ask you a type. Now, I'm not going to focus on anything below new selection quite yet. In a few minutes, I'll show you some examples of those, and predominantly in the next video when we start to incorporate selecting by location. But the real purpose of selection type is to remind you that selecting is dynamic, meaning you don't have to restart every time you do it. You could select by a crime type and then sub-select from those crime types whether an arrest was made or not. And then from that you can remove selections maybe that were near parks, or select selections that are in certain neighborhoods. The point being, much in that same way in the first video, how we looked at the table that was selected and highlighted it, we can do the same thing here, right? You can build selections off of one another. But since we don't have any yet, we need to start with this new selection. And then really what you do is you simply come in here and you define an expression. Now, this is a vast improvement from where ArcGIS used to be. ArcGIS used to require you to actually type in the code manually, SQL. And so if there's anybody in this room who programs in SQL, maybe you work with Microsoft Access or other databases, you can feel free to play around and use that here. I'll make some links in the email and notes about class to my YouTube channel where I do show some SQL operations from how it used to be in ArcGIS that can be exported and ported over here. But the vast majority of you won't have this on. Oops. You'll use just the basic where clauses. And the way it's setting up is it's saying, I'm going to select instances where, and this is the attribute, right? It's looking for a field. And so perhaps I'll say we're primary, the primary crime, and then it'll provide any number of options. Is equal to, does not equal, begins with a letter, does not begin with, ends with, does not ends with, includes a value, contains the text, does not contain the text, right? Is null, is not null. These are all of the things that you can search for. Well, let's test how some of them works, right? Primary is equal to, and very cool, anytime you do it, it pops up a drop-down list of the values that are there. So if I'm interested, for example, in thefts, I could find theft, and I would then hit run. And lo and behold, there we go. Only those that are thefts highlight themselves. The cool thing is that you can build clauses too, right? Anytime you add a clause, the first thing provided to you is this concept of and or. And though it seems boring to sort of focus on the difference between the two, it is sort of important for selections, and it'll keep popping up throughout the semester. And means both things may be true. So when you're using select by attributes, typically this has to be two different fields, right? I couldn't say the primary category is theft and the primary category is criminal damage. It simply won't work, right? Each field gets one attribute in theft. But I could say, an example that I'll do here, I want the primary crime to be theft, and I want to see how many were arrests. So arrest is equal to yes. And now what was once sort of 4,700 is now 599, right? That's fairly common that thefts, aren't often found if someone is taking something small from a car or something similar, or aren't often sort of arrested from beyond that. The difference then is or means either can be true, right? So if I were to do this, this would be a strange one, right? It would either give me thefts that are yes or no, or give me any crime that was an arrest. That's maybe not as interesting. So maybe what I want to see here is like a theft and a burglary, we'll just say, right? And so then it'll give any of those that are true, right? So it jumped up to about 5,776 now. So that is effectively the meat of a selection, right? It allows you to sort of visualize your information in a new way by using the attributes and highlighting those that meet certain criteria. We didn't play with it here, but I'll show you an example. You can also use numerical things as well. Now I'm going to pick beat, which is just literally the beat number. But notice the moment you pick a number, you actually get some cool stuff here, right? Is above average, is below average. If this were a real number, perhaps like I was looking at home sales, right? It would average what it was, and it would tell you if it was above or below. Same thing with greater than, right? I can say is greater than, let's say, 1651. And then it'll only run, right, those that are 1654, 1652, which again is a beat we can't see because beat is not a linear-based continuous number. It's just a number that's representing sort of the beat in the city. The only other interesting thing I think to show here for now with select by attributes is this inverse clause, right? So if I were to go to the primary and I were to say is equal to our assault, and I invert it, what it's actually going to be doing is selecting anything that is not assault, right? So it's just a different way to almost switch the selection and take everything there. Two last things I want to show you about the attributes, knowing that in the next video is really where we'll start playing around more with this selection type. If I go back to that sort of preliminary, primary is equal to theft, I can take advantage of the thing we learned last video about how selections will sort of focus the processing. So, I'll only analyze what's selected here, should I choose to. And that can really come in handy for statistics and summaries, right? So what if I were to come up here to summarize and do it on the arrests? And what I would effectively be doing here is only summarizing fields that are, I inverted it, so it's actually showing non-thefts here. Coming back in, I'm going to go to thefts. So this is only showing me the 4,700 thefts. And I'm then going to say, hey, summarize for me how many of those were arrests, right? The case field is the summary field, so this is going to break it down by yes or no. And, if I had a numeric field in here, like value of object stolen, I could summarize it. But the cool thing is you can literally pick any field and make the statistic type count, and it'll just count up the number of records. And so now a table will come back with just two values, and those two values will be, thefts that yes led to arrests and thefts that no didn't lead to arrests. And you can sort of quickly and easily and visually see it. Right, I could do the same thing here with the secondary field. I'll come here and say maybe actually make the summary of the secondary, and it'll do the same exact thing, except maybe it'll tell me the numeric different types of sort of thefts. How many of them were 500 and under versus how many were from a building versus how many were car and how many were over. 500. And same basic concept here, right? Except it's sort of breaking it down here so you can quickly and visually summarize data. This is an incredibly common process that happens with selections, right? You select some data and then you do summarizer statistics to visually understand just the parameters of that data set right there. The last thing I'll show you with attributes, and I'm going to come up here to clear, right? That's my way to take a selection away when I don't need it. There's a cousin of select by attribute called definition query that if you right-click the crimes and go to properties, you'll see it here. It's basically, if a selection highlights what you say, definition query hides what you don't want. It doesn't delete anything, but like the way it would work is, let's say I were to do that same thing about theft. You know, primary is equal to theft. What it's going to do is effectively only show the thefts. Right? So it looks sort of like everything's disappearing. It's not that I have a smaller data set, it's just that I'm only visualizing the thefts. I didn't delete any of the other data, but it's creating something where if I'm going to perform analytics or such, it's only going to do it on the thefts. It's just sometimes a cleaner way if you're not selecting all over the place and incorporating select by location, but that you just want to quickly visualize or filter your data only by some value, you can come here and do a definition query. You know, and then when you're done, you can exit out, you know, and it'll pop back to having all of the crimes. So that is select by attributes. And in the next video, we will look at the cousin to that, which is select by location.